Well, we're going to wrap up George Washington today. He has written his farewell address, which we looked at yesterday, and now he's going to appear at the swearing in of the new president, John Adams. And we'll see what happens to conclude our looking at this part of his life, his presidency.
President-elect John Adams.
How long is the president away? I'm not sure, sir. But I hear he walked here alone.
Well, Mr. President, this is the day.
You're still officially president, sir.
Not for long. I'm nearly out. Going in the end. See which of us will be the happiest.
The Chief Justice is ready, Mr. President.
Remember Trenton? Marching through the cold and dark, and the sleet wet our powder so our muskets wouldn't fire, and we were wondering what the devil we were going to do, and the general says, "Use your steel!"
And give it all possible success and duration consistent with the ends of his providence.
Congratulations. Thank you, sir. I believe this is the most satisfying moment of my career. The torch has been passed without violence, not to a king.
Yes, Mr. President, I agree with you. After you, Mr. President.
Oh, no. I'm a private citizen now. Mr. Vice President.
Wasn't that final scene touching?
It's kind of boring.
Boring.
Yeah. I thought the credits should have been rolling when he was walking.
So like, how did he get the camera?
Okay, apparently you didn't understand what was happening, the import of it.
No.
You know, for the conversation we saw the night before with Martha, and then to have his presidency vindicated by the people's reaction to him as he was leaving, I think it was a special moment. Let's have the lights back on. We'll talk a little bit about Washington. What do you think would have happened if Jefferson or Hamilton had been the first president? How do you think things would have worked out differently, or would it have? Any thoughts? All right, Michaela, get us started.
I don't feel like things would work out as nicely at all, because George Washington had a good way of just diffusing issues and finding like a good middle ground. And I feel like Washington and Jefferson didn't have that. They were like
Hamilton and Jefferson.
Yeah, Hamilton and Jefferson. They didn't have that. They like both wanted what they wanted, and they weren't really willing to compromise unless it was by George Washington's.
Yeah, I think that's well said. Hamilton and Jefferson were a little more strong-headed, you might say, a little more stubborn for what they wanted to do. Washington was able to remain somewhat neutral, to find the best in both sides. And part of that is the understanding, just as he pointed out in the farewell address, that there is a need for a strong central government. But on the other hand, not to go too far with that, so that the states become a non-entity. The states have a place in the Constitution as well, and for their authority. There's an old axiom. I'm not sure if you've heard it or not. Power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. You ever heard that? Some of you have. Let me say it again, and I want you to talk to me in relation to Washington. Okay, the expression is power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. First of all, what does that mean? What does that expression mean? Hayden, you know what that means? Nate?
Does it mean how much power you have is how much you be corrupt?
Yeah, it sort of has that idea that just being in a position of power has a corrupting influence on people. And if you have absolute power, what's that mean? What's absolute power? Sarah? Right. And so if you have total power, complete power, like a king does, or a dictator, the chances are greater that you're going to be corrupted. It's absolutely positive you're going to be corrupted. Apply that to Washington. Concerning the opportunities and the reality of what happened with Washington as president. Evaluate Washington's presidency in light of that statement. Would you say that Washington was corrupted by the power he had? He did not have absolute power, although he could have. Do you remember at the end of the war, there were those that wanted to make him king? And King George III of England even said that if he doesn't become king, he's, well, I can't remember the exact words, but the greatest man in the world, that he would refuse to do that once he had this opportunity. So he could have, but he didn't. And then as he had power as president, he could have become corrupted, but didn't. We have seen presidents even that have been corrupted by their power. We've certainly seen senators and congressmen corrupted by their power, governors. So why wasn't Washington? Why wasn't he corrupted? Any ideas? Okay, Michaela?
I think a large factor would be that he was a Christian who believed in God and that he asked him, he thought asking God throughout his presidency about like, how to deal with things. And he had also seen it in other people and like how it hurt them, and he was like, I'm not gonna let that happen to me.
Yeah, good. So both through his experience and his faith. He had seen where God had brought him. Remember even back to the French and Indian War when he had all those bullet holes in his coat and 2 horses shot out from under him. He knew that God had a plan for him and that he was in God's purpose for our country. And that would not be served if he had allowed himself to be corrupted. So his moral integrity was a big part of that. The word integrity, what does that mean to you? When you hear the word integrity, what do you think? What is integrity? Devin?
Doing what's right even when no one's around.
Yeah. So that means it comes from within, right? It's not something you're doing for show if you have integrity. Would you say that Washington is a good example of integrity? Seems like it, right? Not only in the way he conducted himself as president, but I'm thinking too of what he did when he was ready to leave the presidency concerning his slaves. He had become convinced that it was wrong. And it really didn't say a way for the country to get out of that, but he certainly found a way for himself to at least free those that were living with him there in the north and allow them to continue a life of freedom. Now, he had other slaves back in Mount Vernon who were freed upon his death. But that was part of him putting into practice what he believed in his heart. Can you think of any more modern examples of people that you think have integrity? I don't know if you can think of anybody in politics or not. If you can't, maybe in other areas. Anybody's picture come to mind when you think of integrity? Okay, Michaela?
I mean, it's not like they died a while ago, but it wasn't that far away, like Ronald Reagan. I think it was,
Yeah, I would agree with that. Ronald Reagan had integrity, and in part because of the same things you said about Washington, his faith in God. He had seen corruption in others. Anybody else come to mind? Can you think of anybody that has integrity today? Caleb?
Mike Pence.
Yeah, I think that's a good example. He has stood for right, even though he gets a lot of opposition. When he was governor of Indiana and as vice president. Stephen?
Who was the guy who ran for the presidency back in, I think it's last name Carter, in 2016?
he was like a pastor.
He was the first guy to like,
Carson.
oh, Carson, yeah.
And
Oh, Ben Carson?
Carson,
Yeah, I would say he's a man with integrity. He is now the, what's he, Secretary of, let's see, what is it? Housing and Urban Development, maybe? Is that it? One of the, he's a member of the cabinet. Yeah, and we know that from his life if you've read his book or seen the movie about him. Anybody else come to mind? Wouldn't it be nice if we had people from whom to choose to vote, that we could say, I know that person has integrity. What you hear so often, and I've heard for years, is when you ask somebody, why did you vote for so-and-so, you almost never hear, because I believe that person has integrity. What you hear most often is, well, they're not as bad as the other one. You've heard that, right? It's a lesser of two evils. And that sure is a sad way to run a country, isn't it? Pick the lesser of two evils. Well, unfortunately, in this country, when somebody like Mike Pence is put forward, he gets so much flack from those that are anti-Christian that it makes it difficult for someone with integrity to run for office. All right, as we finish up this section, we want to look at the content questions on page 167. And I want you to do that for tomorrow. Complete the content questions on page 167. And we will look at those tomorrow. And we will review chapter 8 tomorrow as well, and then have the test over chapter 8 on Thursday. Remember that tomorrow, being Wednesday, we will have our Bible class tomorrow. So the memory verse from last week will be in play there. Any questions? Michaela?
Questions have to include something.
No.